Warning: the following video contains spoilers on events of the Trails series. In the first primer video I made all those months ago about the Trails series, I mentioned I quite like these games, and I've now finished playing through all of the localized titles, even making my way through a few of them all over again. With a primer on the Trails series done, and a couple of short-form videos on some aspects of the gameplay experience, such as my ode to the Shining Palm, and my analysis on whether the different max rank profession point rewards are worth it, it's now time to dive deeper into the series and go through all the notable and fascinating aspects of this world, such as the nations, organizations, technology, and major events, meaning yes, going through the different games. With how much impact different organizations, secret societies, and even schools have on the continent of Zemuria, I thought talking about the most important ones would be a good place to start, and among them, the best known and most iconic are, of course, the Bracers. I do have to mention that anything I cover here is up to the events of Trails into Reverie. In other words, covering only the arcs that have been localized. Should updates be required once the new arc is out, I'll release a new version of this video with those details. I've included timestamps for the different sections of this video down to the specific bracer to help you with navigation. Now, without further ado, the Supporting Gauntlet. The Bracer Guild is an organization of combat specialists and investigators serving the populace of Zemuria, helping them with their troubles and answering their cries for help. As it's stated in Trails in the Sky, the guild helps the community with monster extermination, crime prevention, finding lost items, and escorting people and goods. They're very much a guild of Dungeons & Dragons adventurers. People come to a guild branch and make a request of the guild, offering some form of reward for completing the task. The guild accepts pretty much anything, from food to quartz to currency. Then bracers stationed in that branch pick up the tasks and get to them, reporting on their completion, earning their reward, and accruing points based on their performance, which go to raising their rank within the organization. With the fact that most, if not all, requests offer an amount of Mira, and given that when there's an emergency the guild itself creates requests and offers a reward, I wouldn't be surprised if it was the guild itself that pays the monetary portion of the rewards when the client is of more humble means. This has never been mentioned in the games, and it's purely my conjecture, of course. You might be wondering, if their role is to serve and protect the people, why do they take rewards? Well, it's simple, bracers gotta eat. People should be rewarded for their deeds, and if there's something the Trail series is great about, is a world that makes sense. Being a bracer is a dangerous job, so of course there's gonna be rewards. But that doesn't mean that if there's trouble that the bracers won't act if there aren't any requests. No, they'll go and help, and while they're doing that, the guild itself will create the request for good bookkeeping, to reward its members and of course keep track of their performance for ranking purposes. As for its history, not much is known regarding the founders or the situations that led to the formation of the guild itself. What we do know is that the Bracer Guild was founded in Le Mans State, in central Zemuria, around 1152 of the Septian calendar, the same time period as the Orbital Revolution. And speaking of orbments, orbital technology organizations, such as the Epstein Foundation, provide the guild members with combat orbments. Details on this are a bit vague. We know of instances where the Foundation gives specific people access to prototypes and experimental units, but there are two important things to consider. Combat orbments are not generally available, and their configuration, meaning the lines of slots inside, are adjusted specifically to match the user's aptitudes. With those points in mind, the only possible answer is that the guild obtains orbments from orbital technology manufacturers directly, and I can see why. Not only is the guild an extremely reputable organization, but bracers find themselves in many different situations, which in turn just becomes great data for orbital engineers. The guild operates under three primary principles or laws, referred to as the Guild Code. 1. Bracers are an organization above the borders of nationality. Their duties to the peace and safety of citizens, meaning bracers owe no loyalty to a particular country. 2. A bracer will recognize a nation's sovereignty and may not interfere with or arrest any person of national military or political standing. Kinda self-explanatory. 3. In the event of unjust imperilement of citizens, the Bracer's sworn duty is to bear the responsibility for the citizens' safety. This final article is key, as it basically means that ensuring the safety of citizens is paramount and Bracers must act even if it means they have to break the code, as it pertains to Article 2 in particular. In fact, Bracers have been involved in wars, intervening wherever people are in danger. The Bracers of Liberl famously helped take back areas from Erebonian occupation during the 100 Days War. Not only that, but there are examples like the Mayor of Rouen case in Trails in the Sky, where Principle 2 is overridden and the Mayor is pursued for arrest. In places with limited law enforcement ability, such as Liberl, where the army also handles that responsibility, but can't reach every single town or have active patrols, and in places where the police is not seen as trustworthy, like in Crossbell prior to the establishment of the Special Support Section, Bracers become the only recourse folks have to solve their problems. Some of these guild branches are constantly requesting senior Bracers from across Zemuria to help cope with the sheer volume of requests. How does one become a Bracer? After applying, new members go through training with a senior Bracer that acts as their mentor, who instructs them primarily on the day-to-day work of a guild member, such as keeping good notes and making sure reports are complete, plus basic knowledge such as the guild code and the history of the guild, the country they're in, and ornaments. And if necessary, the mentor will also act as a combat instructor. For example, for Estelle and Joshua, Scherazard Harvey acted as their mentor, as Cassius did for her during her own training, but in their case, given that Estelle uses the same weapon as her father, I would say Cassius handled the combat training part. Not that Joshua needed any training. Upon completion of the final trainee assessment, which usually comes in the form of a guild request, such as clearing the sewers of Roland as seen in the start of Trails in the Sky, and optionally a written test, as evidenced by the hidden quest in Trails from Zero, where Michel, the receptionist for the Crossbell branch, quizzes the newly formed Special Support Section and states these are standard questions from the Junior Bracer written test. And I say optionally because Estelle and Joshua didn't take a written test. They just got a recap from their mentor. But with those requirements complete, the trainee becomes a junior member of the guild, capable of taking on requests and responding to crises, but considered by the guild to still be inexperienced for tackling big cases. So seniors take priority over them in those situations. In fact, as demonstrated by Agate and Rouen in Sky First Chapter, if a senior and a junior both want to go after a request, the guild favors the senior over the junior. To become a senior member, junior Bracers must go through all of their local branches and obtain letters of recommendations from each of them. This likely also means that another restriction on juniors is that they can't work abroad. Bracers have an internal ranking system, which determines their experience and skill, earned through their completion of requests and solving crises, represented in the game as earning Bracer points. Junior Bracers follow a numeric ranking system starting at 9th class and getting up to 1st class. Senior Bracers are ranked from G to A. There is an unofficial S rank though, for those truly exceptional members of the guild who have solved a national level crisis. One such Bracer is of course the Exalted One, the Ultra Badass, Cassius Bright, father of Estelle Bright and adoptive father of Joshua, the main characters in Trails in the Sky, and someone held in the highest esteem and nearly worshipped by dozens of characters in the series, but we'll get to him later. When it comes to the events of the Trails series, you can find Bracers in every arc, as Bracers are the universal do-gooders of Zemuria, so they step up and step in every time there's a crisis. Having said so, they have the biggest role to play in the Liberl Arc, Trails in the Sky, as the main characters are Bracers themselves. Not only that, but Liberl as a kingdom has very strong ties with the guild, with branches in every major city. The guild's part in Trails in the Sky can be summed up with the following points. Cassius Bright disappears, en route to a situation in the Empire of Erebonia. Before he departs, he leaves some of his work to the newly minted junior Bracers, Estelle and Joshua Bright, and some of his other colleagues. As far as everyone knows, the airliner he was on just disappeared out of thin air. Estelle and Joshua also receive a curious object, a dome-like black ornament which was left for Cassius with the instructions of taking it to Professor R. Estelle and Joshua recover Roland's gift for the Queen for her birthday, a giant Decimalus crystal, aka Green Septium Crystal, stolen by the Capua Sky Bandits, but they're unable to capture the thieves. Estelle and Joshua, while in Boss, find the passengers of the airliner and confront the Capua Sky Bandits who had kidnapped them. They discover that Cassius was never on the airship to begin with. During their stay in the Guild branch of Rouen, the local orphanage burns down. Estelle, Joshua, and Agate Crosner investigate the situation and discover the culprit is the mayor of Rouen, who hoped to use the land the orphanage was on. Upon discovery, he uses an artifact and sends monsters after the Bracers, their allies, and Duke Dunan, a member of the royal family. Between his prior actions and this one, it gives the Bracers enough reasons to call on Article 3 of the Guild Code and pursue Mayor Dalmort, and he's captured with the help of the Royal Guard and their brand new airship, the Arsail. As part of this investigation, they face a group of highly skilled masked assailants, but are unable to capture them. In Zeiss, they hand the Black Orbment to Professor R, that being Professor Russell, one of the leading engineers in orbital technology on Zemuria and a disciple of Professor Epstein, the man who first created orbments. Think of Professor Russell as more or less the Trail series version of Doc Brown. Professor Russell's experiments with the Black Orbment trigger its ability, once seen only briefly with a confrontation with Mayor Dalmor and his artifact, the Orbital Shutdown phenomenon. The Black Orbment can disrupt the function of any orbment in its vicinity. The exact radius of this phenomenon is anything but consistent, but at the time of the test in Zeiss, it shuts down the entire city. Professor Russell is kidnapped and the Black Orbment taken by the same masked assailants from the prior chapter in the story, and it's here the Bracers make the discovery that they're members of the Royal Army's Intelligence Division, led by Colonel Alan Richard. While the Bracers do manage to rescue the Professor, the Intelligence Division agents take back the Black Orbment, which they call the Gospel. In Gransel, the capital, the Intelligence Division's plot becomes apparent. First, they put Queen Alicia under house arrest, and controlling who comes and goes, claims she's abdicating in favor of Duke Dunan, who's very much under the division's thumb. Then they plan to marry a crown princess off to a foreign noble, most likely to ship her off and prevent interference in the succession. And as a kicker, with the castle under their control, they can go into the ancient ruins beneath it and use the Gospel to break one of the seals on the Aureole, one of the Septarians, powerful entities aligned with the world's elements, in this case, the higher element of space. Think of it as something that can alter reality at a fundamental level. Estelle, Joshua, and the rest of the guild members in Gransel put a stop to the division's ambitions, though they're unable to prevent Colonel Richard from breaking the seal. Though they stop the conspiracy from succeeding, it quickly becomes clear that it was all a front, and the members of the Intelligence Division were but pawns for a more clandestine group, the secret society Ouroboros, with people all over this conspiracy brainwashed or at least controlled in some capacity, up to and including Colonel Richard himself. In the months that follow, the society sends their enforcers out to the different Liberl regions to perform experiments on their Gospel replicas, using the Black Orbments to cause all sorts of problems, with the Bracers forced to solve each of them and slowly piecing together the society's intent. In Rouen, they projected ghostly apparitions across the region, scaring the pants off people. In Zeiss, they experiment with tampering with septium veins, causing earthquakes of increasing strength. In Roland, their field test covers the entire region in a deep mist, and those trapped inside come under the attack of vaporous apparitions or fall into a deep slumber and can't be woken. In Gransel, they manipulate the former Intelligence Division's second-in-command to cause chaos, using an army of automatons and a tank equipped with a Gospel unit. In Boss, the Aureole's guardian beast comes under their control thanks to the Gospel, a giant blue dragon called Ragnar. Then the final steps of the Society's plan kick off. First, they can control the 4 tetracyclic towers in Liberl, ancient ruins that serve the second seal on the Aureole. With the seals broken, they bring out the Liberl Arc from the pocket dimension it had been shunted to for more than 1,000 years. This is where the Aureole is located. The return of the Arc triggers the orbital shutdown phenomenon across all of Liberl and the south of Erebonia, which the Imperial government doesn't take too kindly to, bringing the nations to the brink of war. The Bracers do one more round trip across Liberl, delivering zero-field generators created by Professor Russell meant to counteract the effects of the orbital shutdown. These generators are installed on the phones of the guild branches to best help the guild coordinate their efforts. The Bracers travel to the Arc and stop the members of the Society from taking control of the Aureole, or so they think. In truth, though the mastermind, Wiseman, is defeated, one of the Society's enforcers manages to retrieve the Aureole. In the arcs that follow, the Bracers take a more secondary role in terms of their participation in the different events, a natural thing as our point of view party is no longer comprised of members of the Bracers Guild, but the police and then students of a prestigious military academy. In Crossbell, we can summarize the guild's part in the arc as follows. Prior to the start of the story and for a good chunk of the arc, Bracers set the bar for what the newly minted special support section should aspire to. The guild members keep things cordial and provide aid to the SSS where needed, sometimes even stepping in when it's clear the police officers are out of their depth. During their final confrontation with the DG cult, the Bracers help with the battle in Crossbell City where the members of the police, Crossbell Guardian Force, and even the Mafia attack the SSS and their allies under the mental control of the cult's leader, Dr. Joachim, and Estelle and Joshua join the SSS on their attack on the Sun Fort, the headquarters of the cult's operations, to confront and arrest Joachim. During the West Zemuria Trade Conference, A-rank Bracer Arios MacLaine attempts to act as a neutral observer and to provide additional security. When the conference comes under attack, Arios joins the police in fighting the terrorists and protecting the attending dignitaries. Both the Bracer Guild and the Special Support Section work to exterminate cryptids manifesting all over Crossbell. Two of these Bracers, Aeolia and Lynn, come under attack from Ouroboros forces during their investigation of the Crossbell wetlands. When the SSS confronts the leaders of this detachment from the Society, another group of Bracers, led by Arios MacLaine, come in to support them. When the Jaeger Corps Red Constellation attacks Crossbell, Arios joins in the defense of the city, which according to the in-universe newspaper means he fought off the mercenaries for 5 hours straight. When Crossbell declares independence, Arios MacLaine leaves the guild and joins up with the presidential faction, becoming commander of Crossbell's armies. In the operation to take down the barrier over the city of Crossbell and the Ions, powerful giant robots provided by Ouroboros, Estelle and Joshua Bright, along with Ren and her robot companion Pater Mater, engage and defeat one of these mechs. When the way is open to the city itself, guild members help break open a path for the SSS to reach Orcus Tower, where the final Ion is located. The next story arc, Trails of Cold Steel, which is all about Erebonia, is one where the Bracers have the smallest part yet. As part of Chancellor Osborne's plans, and prior to the arc, the government cut ties with the Bracers Guild, and most of its branches were shut down, with only Legram and Ulster's branches remaining open but with minimal staff. With that said, Bracers are part of the story and we can sum it up. Sara Valestein, A-rank Bracer, leaves the guild for a teaching job at Thor's Military Academy, becoming the teacher for Class 7, where our protagonists are. As the arc progresses, she leaves Thor's and resumes her work as a Bracer. Toval Randoneur is one of the few Bracers still active in Erebonia. At Sara's request, he keeps an eye out and helps members of Class 7 during their field trip to Bareahard. Together with Viscount Victor Arsaid, Toval joins the crew of Prince Oliver's ship, the Courageous, and then the Courageous 2 when it appears in Cold Steel 4. As war breaks out between the Noble Alliance and the Imperial government, Toval receives a request from Prince Oliver to take his sister, the Imperial Princess, out of the capital and into hiding. Toval and Sara Valestein now return to active Bracer status with other allies, attack the capital ship of the Noble Alliance, the Pantagruel, to rescue Reen and Princess Alphin, held captive aboard the ship. Crossbell Bracers join the resistance against the Erebonian occupation, but are ultimately unable to prevent the annexation to the Empire. After the Civil War, Bracers return to the Empire. Agate Crosner travels to the New Thor's Branch campus with Tita, and helps with the investigation on Hamel, the small town that got wiped off the map and was used as the excuse for the 100 Days War. During the Great Twilight, Bracers join up with Prince Oliver's Radiant Wings faction for his plan to stop the masterminds pulling the strings behind the brewing World War. This included a few different actions. 1. Infiltrate Orcus Tower in Crossbell and disable a barrier preventing access to a shrine critical for the rivalries, a conflict between the chosen pilots of the Divine Knights. aka Mighty Magical Mecha, something key to the plot. Join the assault on the salt pails, giant pillars of salt that serve as barriers protecting the final stage for the rivalries, the Tuatha de Danann, aka the Imperial Fortress. Join the assault on Tuatha de Danann and help defeat the main villain, Ishmelga. In the opening sequence for Trails into Reverie, Bracers join the fight to liberate Crossbell from Imperial forces still controlling the city. When Crossbell is occupied by the forces of the Supreme Leader, the Guild joins the resistance and later on help with both the second liberation of the city and the fight against the Retributive Tower and the forces of Elysium. This more or less covers major events involving members of the Guild across the 3 major arcs and the Epilogue, Trails into Reverie. So now we only have one more thing to talk about. There are dozens of Bracers in the Trail series, in between field agents and receptionists, and not all of them have a big part to play, so I will limit this list to playable Bracers or the ones with a big impact in the stories. Having said so, just because they're not on this list doesn't mean they're not great characters. So let's start with the biggest name, and one of the most powerful people on the continent. The Exalted One, the ultra badass, Cassius Bright, is the head of the Bright family, which includes Estelle, Joshua, and by Trails into Reverie also Ren. Let's sum that up. There's Cassius, an S-class Bracer, renowned tactician, and a divine blade of the 8 Leaves 1 Blade School. Estelle, his daughter, an A-rank Bracer he trained personally, who in her first year on the job stopped rebels from staging a coup and then an international secret society from obtaining a reality-altering divine treasure. There's also his adoptive son and his daughter's partner, Joshua, who not only joined her in these activities, but much like Ren, was once an enforcer/assassin for that secret society in which all of its members are monstrously strong. So yeah, if this family goes evil, Zemuria is screwed. But back to Cassius. He was a military man, instrumental in repelling the Erebonian invasion during the 100 Days War. His tactics, effectively cutting Erebonian supply lines and allowing Liberl to launch a counteroffensive. In their attempts to stem the tide though, the Erebonians ended up hitting the Roland Clock Tower, resulting in the death of Cassius' wife, Lena. Not being able to be with her in her last moments, and believing that since it was his operation that he had caused her death, he left the army, even stopped using a sword at all, and became a Bracer instead, a protector. He soon developed a reputation as a dependable Bracer, working across Zemuria and apparently solving a crisis in the Republic of Calvert, which earned him not just an A rank, but the unofficial S rank. It helps that he is ridiculously strong and one of the keenest tactical minds in the continent, someone who doesn't miss a single clue or beat. He also trained Scherazard Harvey as a Bracer, after her traveling circus troupe disbanded and the young girl had nowhere else to go, so he took her under his wing. Wouldn't be the last time he took someone in when they needed it. While on a mission, he came under attack from an Ouroboros enforcer, but quickly defeated a young boy coming after him, Enforcer number 10, Black Fang. When his own allies tried to take the kid out, Cassius intervened, rescued the boy, Joshua, took him home with him and adopted him, allowing the kid to have as normal a life as possible. Eventually both his kids joined the Bracer Guild, this time trained by his own apprentice. Unfortunately, this is where his relative peace ends and things get hectic for Cassius. A series of attacks on Erebonian Guild branches forces the Bracer Guild to dispatch Cassius to the Empire. In truth, this was orchestrated by Ouroboros for the exact purpose of getting him out of Liberl, so he couldn't interfere with the Gospel plan, which had the final goal of retrieving the Aureole, the Septarian of Space. Make a note of this. I'll be bringing this mission up to the Empire a lot. By the time he returns, Estelle and Joshua have already stopped the Intelligence Division from taking over the country, and are in the depths of Liberl Castle, attempting to stop Colonel Alan Richard from breaking the first seal on the Aureole, arriving at the last second to save the group from the attack of, well, the final boss of Trails in the Sky first chapter, giving the party enough breathing room to get a second wind and finish the fight. With the Intelligence Division dismantled and everything that Colonel Richard had done, the army is left in disarray, forcing Cassius to leave behind the life of a Bracer and return to active military service. He is given the rank of Brigadier General, and once General Morgan retires, Cassius becomes the leader of the entire Liberl army. During Trails in the Sky, the second chapter, he plays a minimal role, but helps Joshua overcome the mental conditioning put into him by Ouroboros, and then appears riding Ragnar the Dragon to save his children as the Liberl Arc collapses around them. Yes, only Cassius Bright can ride a dragon in the Trails series. He makes a true return to the story in Trails of Cold Steel 4, as the leader of the combined forces for the Mil Mirage plan, set to act as a direct opposite to the Erebonian government's Operation Jormungandr, with Cassius acting as the leader of the armies that will clash with the Imperial ones as Erebonia moves to conquer all of Western Zemuria. Worth mentioning that this is the idea of an Erebonian Duchess who is a tactical genius with incredibly powerful generals at her disposal, and still, the one person she thought could actually pull this off is Cassius Bright. Yeah, the man's incredible. In terms of the main story, his final appearance, as far as I know, is in Trails into Reverie, where he appears at the end aboard the next generation ship Arsail 2 to help the huge ensemble cast infiltrate the Retributive Tower and stop Elysium. Cassius is held at the highest esteem across Zemuria, and he not only trained his daughter and Scherazard, but even after leaving his own sword behind, he still trains several characters in sword fighting, such as Alan Richard, the head of the Intelligence Division and Trails in the Sky baddie, and Julius Schwartz, the head of the Royal Guard. If you need more reasons to understand why Cassius is a living legend in the Trail series, there's this. After his actions in the war, the Erebonians marked him at the hazard level L4, the second highest, and means he's someone they need to watch closely. After solving the incident of the attacks on the guild branches, they upgrade him to the highest danger level, L5, meaning he's a severe threat to national security. Hell, the only reason Colonel Richard falls for the manipulation that drives him towards the coup is because he believed that without Cassius in the army, there was no other choice to protect the nation from foreign threats. Double hell, Ouroboros went out of the way to get him out of Liberl because they were certain that if he was in town, the planet would go to hell fairly quickly. Cassius even acts as a boss in Trails in the Sky III, a copy of him appearing in the realm of Phantasma, where he is hands down one of the hardest bosses in the entire Trails series. Arios MacLaine is the most respected A-rank bracer in Crossbell, and as you'd expect from the rank, he's incredibly powerful, a master of one of the forms of the 8 Leaves One Blade School, earning him the title of Divine Blade of Wind, though my nickname for him is Die Hard Samurai Daddy. I mean, look at the man. Before becoming a bracer, Arios was a detective for the Crossbell Police, working with Guy Bannings, brother of future SSS detective Lloyd Bannings, and Sergei Liu, the man who would become the chief of the SSS. But things changed when a truck explosion took the life of his wife and blinded his daughter Shizuku. After this event, Arios left the police and joined the Bracers Guild. I've always found it curious how these events are kind of a parallel to Cassius, both single parents who left their chosen profession behind after the death of their spouse. Sometime later, lawyer Ian Grimwood told Arios the truth behind the explosion that killed his wife. It was the result of one of the many secret conflicts between Erebonia and Calvert. Realizing just what it would take to finally liberate Crossbell from the oppression of its neighboring powers, he joins Grimwood in the Azure Zero project, which had the intent of reforming the Septarion of Mirage, Demiurgos, whose power primarily governs causality, with the intent of creating an entire new timeline where Crossbell was more powerful than its neighbors, and where the tragic incident that killed his wife never happened. When his former partner in the police, Guy, got too close to what they were doing, he and Arios fought, and during their encounter, Grimwood killed Guy, but Arios blamed himself and lived with the guild from then on. This is why when Lloyd asks him if he killed his brother, Arios takes the blame. Another curious parallel between Arios and Cassius is how they saved the special support section and 2 children from a monster attack at the start of Trail Zero, which is very much the same as when Cassius saves Estelle and Joshua and 2 children from a monster attack in the prologue of Trails in the Sky. Arios is very much in the background of Trails from Zero, just one of the local bracers the SSS runs into, He is very much indifferent towards them at the start, but over time comes to respect their skill and dedication. He helps them during the Battle of Crossbell at the end of Zero, when the DG cult has taken control of the minds of most of the police and Guardian forces, taking out multiple attackers just as they're about to overwhelm the special support section. He plays a much larger role in Trails to Azure, becoming the commander of Crossbell's army when Dieter Croix declares himself president of the independent Crossbell state. When the SSS arrive to stop the ritual that would turn their ward, Kia, into the new Septarion, Arios stands in their way to ensure the ritual's success, and he would later block their path again in the game's final dungeon. He's ultimately defeated on the Azure Tree, where he reveals the truth of Guy's death to Lloyd. After that, not much happens with Arios in terms of comeuppance or legal punishment, because Crossbell is invaded and ultimately annexed to Erebonia, and Arios fights as part of the resistance. And while he does make a brief appearance in a cutscene in Trails of Cold Steel 3, he actually returns to the series in Trails into Reverie as part of Rufus's group, just as the party is fighting mechanical replicas of him. But Trails into Reverie has a huge cast, and aside from the big three, those being Lloyd, Reen, and Rufus, most others are relegated to the background. I like to think of Arios as what would have happened if Cassius had gone astray. There are similarities between the two, but ultimately, Arios chose a path that would have him betray everyone he knew for what he thought was the right thing, to change things so that his tragedy never happened. I think the key point between them is that Cassius has a guilt born from believing that he indirectly had a hand in the death of his wife, and Arios was just a victim of circumstance, which can only lead to a deep sense of powerlessness and anger at the injustice. Toval Randoneur. Toval's nickname is the Zero Artisan, for the speed at which he casts his arts. He's heavily modified his orbment to speed up his casting tremendously, which indicates he has a great degree of technical knowledge on the workings of combat orbments and the mechanics of arts and their casting. But you'll never see Toval boast about anything. He's an incredibly humble and down-to-earth bracer. He was offered A rank due to his skill, but he turned it down, feeling more comfortable with remaining as a B rank. He's very sociable, and he's one of the characters that more easily connects with others, and is very good at calming everyone during a tense situation, helping them to see the brighter side. Such as when he reassured Reen at the start of Trails of Cold Steel 2, after the Cold Steel protagonist learned that quite some time had passed since the final battle of the previous game. All of these personality traits, and the fact that he's, well, a caster, are why I call him the Chill Wizard. Toval had a rough start to life, living in the streets and stealing to survive. Eventually he came across Micht, the Trista pawnbroker we interact with in Trails of Cold Steel, who offered him two important things: a steady stream of work as a smuggler and some real human connection. One of those jobs involved transporting an artifact to the church in Liberl. Along the way, Jaegers targeted him, but he was ultimately rescued by Ein Selnet, a member of the Grouse Ritter, the branch of the church tasked with the recovery and containment of artifacts. Kevin Graham was Hemisphere in Gaius Warzel. All of them playable characters in the series are part of this organization. I recommend Toval join the Bracers, and he does, and the events of that smuggling job are forever immortalized in the in-universe novel Carnelia, written by Micht himself. I covered most of Toval's involvement in the stories in the Erebonian section, but there are a few things left to say. During the events of Cold Steel 2, Toval appears near the start of the game, rescuing Reen from a magical knight, a giant autonomous construct. In the climax of the game, Toval and Prince Olivert keep Ouroboros agents Bleu-Blanc and Duvalie the Swift at bay, giving the members of Class 7 an opening to reach deeper into the Infernal Castle, aka the final dungeon. In Cold Steel 3, along with Agate, he saves the members of Class 7 from Ouroboros agents yet again, this time holding his own against Campanella, Enforcer number 0 and my favorite. Given that Campanella uses arts quite freely without much in the term of casting times, and that, like all Ouroboros members, his skill and power are off the charts, the fact that Toval went toe-to-toe with him proves just how impressive the Chill Wizard is. Another indication of his competence is the fact that when the Courageous is destroyed at the end of Cold Steel 3, he is the only member of the crew that comes out without any significant injury. reappearing in Cold Steel 4 aboard a Courageous 2 very much unscathed, where Viscount Arcade lost an arm and Prince Olivert an eye. I quite like Toval. I think it's impossible not to like him, and I would love for him to return and have a bigger part to play in the series. This is a guy who persevered as a bracer in Erebonia despite the official order to close most branches, spending his time between Legram and Ulster to account for the severe lack of personnel. He deserves more. Zin Vathek, aka Zin the Immovable, a Calvardian beast of a man, fighting just with his martial arts. He looks intimidating, but he's really just a karate teddy bear, incredibly jovial and kind, and quite patient too. He was a student of the title style in Calvert, training under Master Yuga Roran, father of former bracer and Calvardian spy master Kirika Roran, and with fellow apprentice Walter Kron, who would end up killing their master in a one-to-one fight and then join Ouroboros as Enforcer number 8, the Direwolf. Zin is one of the first A-rank bracers we meet in the series, and at the time he says there are only about 20 or so bracers with that rank on Zemuria. He is considered one of the most skilled Calvardian bracers, and so effective at his job that the shady organizations of Calvert consider him a threat, more or less in the same way that the Erebonian government considers Cassius a threat. Speaking of Cassius, at the time of Trails into Reverie, Zin is offered S-rank recognition, but he turns it down, claiming that neither his skill, power, or achievements match those of Cassius Bright, and so he doesn't deserve the rank, proving once more that Cassius is the stick by which everyone is measured. We also first meet Zin because of Cassius. As the latter was leaving for that situation in Erebonia, he sent a message to Zin and asked him to travel to Liberl to help out. We meet the Immovable in Zeiss and then in Granson, taking part in a martial arts tournament. Estelle and Joshua join his team and win, earning a night in the castle, where Joshua and Estelle manage to meet the Queen. After that, Zin remains by their side until the end of the game. In Trails in the Sky, the second chapter, he makes an appearance during the Zeiss part of the game, saving Estelle and Joshua from Walter, and then much like in the first game, he becomes a member of the party until the end. Trails in the Sky the Third marks his last playable part, where he is one of the people transported to the realm of Phantasma, along with the Growl Speaker Dominion Kevin Graham and Esquire Reese Argent. Much like Reverie, Sky 3 is an ensemble cast game, and the core of the story is more about Kevin Graham than anyone else, so there isn't much to say about Zin in that game. While not playable, he does make an appearance in the end sequence of Trails of Cold Steel 4, as a guest in the wedding of Scherazard and Prince Olivert. He's seen drinking and talking with his friends. I am very happy that he is gonna make a return in Kuro no Kiseki. I very much love playing with Zin in the party, because he's perfect. He's a great tank, with good defense, which you can make better, lots of health and he can heal, cure negative conditions, buff himself up, taunt enemies, and then open one monumental can of whoop ass. Do you need more? No. My vote is Zin for S rank. Sara Valestein. Sara is another A-rank bracer, nicknamed the Purple Lightning. Sara was born in Northumbria, a frigid region north of Erebonia, though it would eventually become part of the Empire. Early in life, she lost her parents to the Northumbrian disaster, where a giant pillar of salt, the Salt Pail, manifested out of thin air and turned the surrounding terrain and the people to salt. She was rescued by and became the adopted daughter of Colonel Valestein of the Northern Jaeger. No first name given to this guy. Sara admired him and decided to follow in his footsteps, starting as a junior Jaeger and eventually making her way up to the main squad and then the position of squad commander, earning her nickname of Purple Lightning along the way. Curiously, most of her crafts are lightning based and they are purple. Sadly, during a confrontation with Nidhogger, a rival Jaeger Corps, Colonel Valestein died saving her and her squad. In his final moments, he told her, "This is what a Jaeger's life is. So are you really sure this is the path you want to pursue?" She lost consciousness holding her father and was rescued by members of the Erebonian army. Learning she'd been left behind by the Northern Jaegers, she escaped and made her way home. But the recent experience and the Colonel's words made her leave that life behind and join the Bracers Guild, where she would become the youngest person to ever reach A rank, and yet another person who became a Bracer after the loss of a loved one. Seems like a bit of a trend. or Zemuria just hates happy people. Remember that situation with the Erebonian guild branches I think I've mentioned about a dozen times? Well, Sara was the closest person available to help with that, but Ouroboros, not leaving anything to chance, sent out an enforcer, number 9, Kruger, aka the Severing Eclipse or the Severing Chains, to intercept Sara, so the guild had no choice but to request Cassius' aid. Sara was also there when the leaders of the two most powerful Jaeger Corps, Red Constellation and Zephyr, fought to the death. In the aftermath, she took Fee, the adopted daughter of Zephyr's leader, under her wing. Fee was someone who, like her, had spent her formative year in a Jaeger Corps and lost her father to the Jaeger life. Eventually, as the guild branches began to close and work as Bracer became much harder, she was offered a teaching position at Thor's Military Academy, the most prestigious military school in Erebonia, where she would become the homeroom teacher for Class 7, a new class comprised of students from both commoner and noble origins, whereas the rest of the classes in the school were segregated into commoner and noble classes. She brought Fee along and the young girl joined Class 7 as well, with Sara hoping the girl would come out of her shell and find friends and something else to live for. Sara doesn't make the best first impression, coming off as very slovenly. She's extremely laid back and loves a good drink at day, at night, morning, at noon, it doesn't matter. The more serious members of the school had a big problem with her, particularly the vice principal. But despite their apprehension and her rather carefree attitude towards the safety of her students, no one doubted her competence as a teacher, even if she did leave their field studies to them while she headed for the local tavern. But as Toval's involvement with Class 7 indicates, just because she's not watching doesn't mean she's leaving things to chance. After her tenure as teacher, she returned to the Bracer Guild, with Fee following in her footsteps, and the two worked together with the members of both generations of Class 7 in the various events of the Erebonian Arc. But for these, I consider Sara and Fee members of Class 7, so I'll speak to their roles in those events in the deep dive for Class 7. Sara is one hell of a character. Purple Lightning officially, Alcoholic Typhoon according to Juices, and my own nickname for her, Reprobate Mommy. Sara Valestein provides a lot of the comic relief in Cold Steel, her carefree attitude contrasting with the more serious events taking place around her and the incredibly serious people she works with. But the great thing is that this attitude helps diffuse some of the situations brought about by the extreme personalities she has to work with, often by giving them something entirely different to focus on. But what no one can deny is that she's good at what she does. One of the best, really. Scherazard Harvey. Shara to her friends, Cassius' apprentice, Estelle and Joshua's mentor, and after Cold Steel 4, wife of the Imperial Prince Oliver Rice Arner. In what might not be a surprise at this point, Shara had a rough youth, living on the streets, stealing to survive, much like Toval did. Eventually she was found and more or less adopted by the Harvey traveling circus troupe, which she considered her family, so much so that she took the troop leader's surname, Harvey, as her own. It was during this time that she met the Bright family, and would return to visit them every time the circus rolled into Roland. Unfortunately, as it seems to be the case for many in the Bracers Guild, things wouldn't remain this way forever. Mr. Harvey died, and the troop disbanded, and Scherazard's older sister figure in the troop, and the person who taught her how to read the tarot and use the whip, Luciola, vanished. With nowhere to go and no one else to turn to, she sought Cassius to help her become a Bracer. She completed her training, and about 5 years prior to Trails in the Sky, in the year 1197 of the Septian calendar, she did her tour of Liberl to become a senior Bracer and achieving C rank, and earning the nickname the Silver Streak, for the shiny silver hair and not from running around with no clothes on. But, considering the description given of Shara's rather epic drinking binges by Estelle, maybe I'm wrong. Sara and her best friend, the Roland receptionist, Aina, can drink most characters under the table, with perhaps only Sara Valestein having the drinking chops to match theirs. In fact, during Trails of Cold Steel 4, the women organize a drinking competition, and one of the groups pits Sara, and Sharon Kruger, who proceeds to outdrink the other two, with Sara considering her to have a transcendental alcohol tolerance on par with Aina. Worth mentioning though is that Sara had already been drinking for hours, before the competition started, so she was competing with a bit of a handicap. As a bracer, Schera will become mentor to Estelle and Joshua Bright and join them for the early portion of their tour around Liberl, particularly the discovery of the airliner, the confrontation with the Sky Bandits, and finding out that Cassius was never aboard the airship. It was during these events that she became acquainted with the man she would eventually marry, Prince Olivert of Erebonia, traveling across Liberl under the assumed identity of the bard Olivier Lenheim. Initially he annoyed her, but slowly grew on her. Schera was there with Estelle and Joshua to stop the coup in Grancel and helped in the sealed area under the castle. In Trails in the Sky 2nd chapter, you can choose to have Schera with you or take Agate instead. If she doesn't join you, she travels across Liberl investigating sightings of Ouroboros with Anelace, where they fight some of the automatons that later are part of the attack on Grancel, and even meet Enforcer number 0, Campanella. But honestly, the important bits for Scherazard in this game are the encounters with Enforcer number 6, the bewitching belle Luciola, Schera's older sister in the troop. She's the one responsible for the mist covering Roland and the apparitions attacking people. You meet her 3 times. Each time she reveals more of the past, particularly the fact that she was the one who killed Mr. Harvey, pushing him off a cliff. First claiming it had been out of a sense of betrayal or abandonment, since the man wanted to leave the troop with a wealthy friend to take care of them, while he left to deal with massive debts he had and not wanting them to suffer any consequences. But later revealing that it had been a crime of passion, when she confessed her love to him and discovered that he only saw her as a daughter. So she snapped and he dropped, which she does as well, jumping off the Axis pillar after your fight with her, despite Schera's attempts to stop her. Though Scherazard remains convinced that she's still out there, and she's right, but we'll get to that in another video. Schera travels to Erebonia during Trails of Cold Steel 3, now an A-rank bracer, as the guild branches are reopened. She learns of Oliver's apparent death, but manages to reunite with him in Cold Steel 4, at which point he proposes to her. The credit sequence of the game shows their wedding. In Trails into Reverie, she and Oliver are kidnapped en route to their honeymoon, but being the badasses they are, they manage to take back their ship from their assailants and reunite with their allies, though the only person you can control is Oliver, as it's heavily implied that Schera can't fight due to being pregnant. She remains by his side for the remainder of the game. I really want to know what happens with them in the years that follow Reverie, meet a new member of the family and all, and given her skill with a whip and her rather sadistic glee she takes in her S-crafts, Schera was already a mommy, the one true Dommy mommy of the Trail series. Now she's just traditional mommy too. Schera is one of the better characters in the Trail series, someone who, much like Estelle and Joshua, has an arc that progresses even after Trails in the Sky. The first part of his story is being the big sister and mentor figure to the main characters, someone to guide and support them. Then it's about her own past, facing Luciola and coming to terms with the revelations the reunion brings. And after that, her story and Oliver's kind of intertwine, and their relationship is always important. There's a great rapport between them in Trails in the Sky 1st and 2nd chapters, and a dialogue at the end of Sky the 3rd seems to heavily imply that he asked her to marry him then and there, but got no reply. He would pop the question again in Cold Steel 4, and this time she agreed. Agate Crosner, aka the Heavy Blade, aka Big Sword Adol Christen. Okay, he's nothing like Adol, but he's a red-headed swordsman and it's an easy, lazy nickname. Sue me. Agate is the first other bracer we meet in Trails of the Sky after Schera and Cassius, and he's featured in both the Ruan and Zeiss sections of the game. The first few meetings are not good, as Agate is very much the epitome of jerk with a heart of gold, just leaning very heavily in the jerk direction. He's rude, has a short fuse, prefers to work alone, and has no time for newbies like our main characters, and he's got no qualms about informing them of this. Worth mentioning though is that despite his rather irascible personality, he does have a good head on his shoulders, and while at times he flies off the handle, he does take the job seriously and is surprisingly analytical when on the job. Agate, very much like other bracer I've spoken of, had a rough time growing up. Zemuria definitely hates kids and happy people. Agate's town was hit during the 100 Days War, and he lost his younger sister, his only family, and I say that because no other family is ever mentioned. The trauma of his sister's loss left a deep scar in Agate, one he primarily filled with anger, at the army, at himself, and he focused that anger through his swordsmanship. It both drove him on, but as both Enforcer number 2, Luve, and Ragnar the Dragon point out, the anger also stops him from achieving more. As a traumatized and very angry kid, Agate fell in with the wrong crowd, becoming the leader of the Raven Gang of Ruan. It was during this time that he had a fateful encounter with a certain Cassius Bright, who inspired the young lad to use his strength for a better cause, so he became a bracer. During his time with Estelle and Joshua, he came across Tita Russell, an encounter that would change pretty much everything for him. The little girl reminded him of his sister, due to the age difference, and given his past, he first pushed her away. When Tita joins in their rescue efforts of her grandfather atop Carnila Tower, despite having been told not to, and more or less causing Agate to get shot with a poisoned round, he berates her. But afterwards, as she stays with him in his recovery, they form a bond. One that grows stronger in Sky's second chapter, when Tita once again nurses Agate back to health, and he opens up about the events of his past. He takes the little girl under his wing, becoming something of a big brother and protector, and slowly starting to heal from the trauma and letting go of a lot of that anger. Curiously, though he sees the relationship as very much of the sibling kind, everyone is very aware that Tita might view things differently. Even more so as she grows older, such as the Cold Steel Games. Tita's parents, especially her mother Erica, detest Agate for his closeness to their little bundle of sunshine and have made actual attempts on his life, or at least intentionally putting him in harm's way. Agate is a badass, fighting with a giant slab of metal more or less shaped like a sword. It looks like a giant machete in the games using sprites, and in Cold Steel 3 the design makes it look not so much forged as made in a workshop. But he's a beast of a fighter and one of the highest damage dealers in the entire series. He's also one of the most relatable people in the Trails games. Someone who's gone through hardship and come out the other end angry at everything, and only learning to let go of some of that anger to actually start working through the issues, opening up and talking about them after finding someone they can trust, someone that cares about them. In the end, it turns out Agate just needed good people in his corner. Estelle Bright is very much the main character of Trails in the Sky. True, Joshua is also a protagonist, but for the most part, Trails in the Sky is her coming-of-age story, from a young naive girl to an intelligent, savvy, competent senior bracer capable of standing on her own 2 feet and deal with whatever life throws at her, even becoming mature enough to realize her own feelings, act on them, and grasp what's truly important to her, and becoming powerful enough to kick so much butt. Estelle's journey in the first chapter of Trails in the Sky is very much a learning one. Not only is she naive, but also somewhat ignorant of truths of the world that are obvious to others. Not to mention she starts out not having much of a filter between her brain and her mouth, and has a habit of vocalizing most of her thoughts, which gets her into trouble when Joshua isn't there to curb some of those impulses. But that journey is also about understanding her own feelings, particularly towards Joshua. She denies them for most of the game, but ultimately realizes she does have a deep love for him. When he disappears at the end of the first chapter, it nearly breaks her, but in yet another demonstration that Estelle's true strength lies in her indomitable spirit, she picks herself up, goes on a training trip to Le Mans, and returns ready to confront the Ouroboros and find Joshua and bring him home, and hell, she succeeds on all fronts. Bonus points, she also manages to win over Ren, though it wouldn't be until Trace from Zero that the girl, Enforcer 15, the Angel of Slaughter, would come to live with them. Estelle is perhaps the kindest character in the series, and her energetic personality gives her a certain magnetism. She just wins people over, even her enemies. She very much lives up to her surname, Bright, as many characters, and hell, even the mysterious doors in Phantasma in Trails in the Sky the Third, compare her to the sun, bright and warm. As part of the Bright family, it's worth mentioning that something else that grows during the games is Estelle's relationship with her dad. At first, she doesn't really acknowledge that he's anything special, because he's just her goofy dad, and they're so alike that they clash quite often. But if there's something that's never in doubt, how much she loves dear old dad. I'm sure you've noticed by now that I've gone straight into talking about the character and not any of the events they take part in, because one, I very much already listed them earlier, and second, To describe her part fully would mean going through every detail of Trails in the Sky. She's one of the protagonists after all. But don't worry, I'll be doing that in the Trails in the Sky first chapter, second chapter, and the third deep dives. As for Estelle, when it comes down to it, I may love Crossbell the most, but Estelle is still my favorite character in the series. Joshua Bright. Joshua. As Enforcer 13, you may have been called Black Fang, but to me, you'll always be my favorite gloomy boy. Joshua, born Joshua Astray, in what is not gonna be a surprise at this point, had a rough start to his life. His peaceful childhood in Hamel, in southern Erebonia, with his sister Karen and her boyfriend Leonhard, was crushed when the town was wiped from the map, resulting in Karen's death. In fact, there were only 3 survivors, though as far as Joshua and Leonhard knew, they were the only ones. The third would come to have a new name, Ash Carbide, and join the new Class 7 during Trails of Cold Steel 3. The trauma of the Hamel tragedy left Joshua with deep emotional scars. Soon after, Campanella arrived and recruited them into Ouroboros, where they became enforcers. One of their missions being to wipe out one of the bases of the DG cult, from where they rescued Ren, who would also join the organization. It was during these years that Weissman, the 5th Anguis, aka the Faceless, came to Leonhard and promised to help with Joshua's trauma. Leonhard, now going by Louve the Blade Lord, Enforcer number 2, accepted but was shocked to see that instead of returning Joshua to being the cheerful boy he knew, what came out of Weissman's treatment was a merciless cold killer. Joshua as an enforcer did primarily assassination missions, many of them having innocent people as collateral damage. Then things changed for him yet again. Under orders from Weissman, he set out to assassinate Cassius Bright, only to be defeated and his identity exposed. Ouroboros agents with Joshua, to protect the Society's secrets, attempted to kill Joshua, but Cassius stopped them and then took Joshua with him and adopted him. And for his part, despite having some reservations, Joshua would come to feel part of this family. Things would change yet again for Joshua at the end of Trails in the Sky first chapter, when Professor Alba, a bumbling archaeologist they met during their journey, reveals himself to be Weissman and lifts the memory block he put on Joshua, allowing him to remember that the entire event leading to him being adopted and even being part of the Bright family was all part of Weissman's plan to have him leak information about the Bracers to Ouroboros, filling the young Bracer with tremendous guilt and despair. He meets with Estelle on the roof of Gransel Castle, confesses his feelings for her, and disappears, wanting to protect her from the darkness in him, something he'd been running from but had to now face. For most of Trails in the Sky the second chapter, he's working on his own, with a couple of Sky Bandits helping him, as he attempts to track down Ouroboros on his own to end their plans. Estelle and Joshua finally reunite aboard the Glorious, the Society's massive airship. Joshua rigs the engines to explode, and the two Bracers escape, landing in one of the beaches near Rouen, where now Estelle confesses her feelings and embraces him, promising to protect them as he had always taken care of her. And this is enough to make the walls crumble in what is perhaps one of the most beautiful and emotional scenes in the entire Trails saga. It's my favorite scene in the entire game. I'm a sucker for a good romance, and for good emotional moments in games, and Estelle and Joshua's story delivers so well. Following this, Joshua returns to active Bracer service and stays with Estelle and the party until the end of the story and beyond, where they become dependable senior Bracers and their arc becomes more about the evolution of their relationship and their quest to bring the little girl Ren into their family, which they succeed on in Trails from Zero. Kurt Nardin. I'm including Kurt here because the poor guy deserves it, and his contribution in the story can be easily overlooked, but he is one of the most important characters in Trails in the Sky. Kurt is a Liberalian Bracer with family roots in Calvard, and he fights with what is considered an Eastern combat style with a long spear. Kurt is an A-rank Bracer, and prior to the start of Trails in the Sky, he received a request from Cassius to investigate a group of operatives dressed in black, members of the Intelligence Division, though at the time, this was an unknown detail. During his investigation, Kurt stole the Black Orban from them and managed to send it to Cassius, though it would be received by Estelle and Joshua instead. So without Kurt, key elements of the plot just don't happen, but he doesn't get the love he deserves, Not only that, but he served as Estelle's instructor during her training journey in Sky's second chapter. And during an optional quest in the same game, he casually mentions that he doesn't need to use an orbment to cast arts, meaning he can straight up do magic, something that usually only the members of Ouroboros can do. So this man is a certified badass, and I'm mentioning him here because he doesn't get the love he deserves. Anelace Elfead. Anelace has a very minor role in the games. In the first Trails in the Sky, she's part of one of the Bracer teams competing in the Grancel Martial Arts Tournament, along with fellow Bracers Kurt, Karna, and Grant. They're ultimately defeated by Estelle's team. Afterwards, she joins the operation to rescue the princess from the members of the Intelligence Division in Herb Royal Villa, the operation to retake the castle, and the ceremony where Estelle and Joshua are conferred senior Bracer status. In Trails in the Sky second chapter, she's Estelle's training partner during her stay in Le Mans State in the guild training ground of Le Local Canyon. But she travels to Liberl with Estelle after their training is complete, and when Estelle is given the choice of who to travel with, Schera or Agate, she'll accompany whoever you didn't pick. Anelace is bright and cheerful, obsessed with all things cute, which is why she nearly has a heart attack when meeting Tita, and her upbeat attitude very much matches Estelle's, whom she considers a rival. She is also the granddaughter of Master Yun Ka-Fai, the creator of the 8 Leaves One Blade School of Swordsmanship, and in Trails of Cold Steel 4, Reen mentioned that he's heard of Anelace's proficiency and potential as a fighter, particularly considering the fact that she's been a practitioner of the style since childhood. Much like Zin, she's part of the ensemble cast of Trails in the Sky III, though there is a vignette with her that has her meet Cassius to help her overcome some self-doubt about her capabilities as a warrior, with Cassius not only dropping the sage advice, but also gifting her the sword he used before he switched to using the staff. So you might be wondering why I'm mentioning her on this list, given how small her role is. Well, for one, she's a party member, and second, she's one of those characters that just seems to have been forgotten and deserve to come back. Being contemporary with Estelle, and a growing practitioner of the 8 Leaf School, even having Cassius' old blade, you gotta admit there needs to be more. There's untapped potential here. Michel. This last one, I'm cheating. Okay, I'm cheating. Because Michel is not a playable character, but I'm bringing him up because he's hands down my favorite Bracer Crossbell. Michel is a receptionist for the Crossbell branch of the guild. He's flamboyant, camp, and just absolutely fabulous. But also so well developed, written, and portrayed that he never crosses the line into a caricature or stereotype. Not only that, but when he finally gets a portrait in Azure, he's hot and stylish. Michel is incredibly capable, to the point where when the Bracer Guild is attacked at the end of Trails from Zero, he sees it coming, sneaks away to safety, and then returns to the guild once danger has passed to help coordinate the local Bracers to help solve the crisis at hand. But what makes Michel so special is his sheer friendliness. He's the first one to form a rapport with a special support section, his indifferent demeanor towards them quickly melting away, and that's very much the norm for Michel. Just a friendly face at all times. When Kia questions why Michel speaks and behaves the way he does, in a very feminine way, he doesn't miss a beat and simply tells her that it's his style, it's what suits him. With Michel as the receptionist, a warm, welcoming face, and the capabilities of the Crossbell Bracers, it's no surprise that the guild is held in such high esteem by the people of Crossbell. The Bracers as a whole are very much the heroes of the Trail series, and I hope that through this video you kind of get an idea of what they're all about. Next up we have Ouroboros, Class 7, the Special Support section, then the Nations, Technology, and then we dive into the games themselves. Thank you for watching, I hope you found this entertaining and or informative, and I'll see you on the next one. As always, happy trails.